Let's talk about the summer of '83. This mystery goes back to one of the first episodes of the whole series called The Laziest. In this episode, Nicole leaves Richard, Elmore's laziest guy, in charge of the household chores, so he makes a bet with his kids, and if they find someone lazier than him, they will do their chores for a whole day, but if not, Gumball and Darwin will do their chores for the rest of their lives. After this, Gumball and Darwin go out to look for someone who might be even lazier than Richard, and they discover the existence of the lazy Larry, the only person in all of Elmore who ever competed with Richard. As the episode progresses, we realize that something happened in the summer of 1983. What made Larry go from being the laziest guy in all of Elmore to literally being the person who supports the town's economy? With all the work he does. We're never told exactly what happened. It's a recurring joke in the episode that whenever they go to tell the story, something happens and we can't hear it. So what happened in the summer of '83? We can't even figure it out? Well, I think that although there's no super definitive answer that tells us exactly what happened, there are enough clues throughout the show to give us a good idea of what kind of traumatic event turned Larry into a workaholic. Even though it's probably just a reference to the birth of Ben Bocklet. But if we pay attention to the mentions and circumstances surrounding the summer of '83, we will realize that there is more to it than meets the eye. First of all, we have to retrieve what little information we have about the summer of '83. When Gumball asks who the lazy Larry is, one of the elders replies that it is a long story that goes back to the summer of '83. The next mention of the summer of '83 is when Gumball and Darwin arrive at the store where Larry works and ask about the lazy Larry. To which Larry replies that there is no lazy Larry there. After Gumball and Darwin press him, Larry says he stopped being lazy many years ago and that it's a story that goes back to the summer of '83. Here Gumball asks Larry to summarize the story, and Larry says he was the laziest guy in Elmore until he lost his title to Richard Watterson. After Gumball and Darwin make Larry lose everything by getting him fired from his job, lose his car, lose his girlfriend and get him out of his house, they go to talk to Richard here and mention the lazy Larry, and Richard says that's a name he hasn't heard since the summer of '83. These are the only 3 times we've heard about the summer of '83, and they give us a guide for our investigation. Whatever happened that summer not only made Larry known as the lazy Larry, as the elders said, but simultaneously made him lose his title to Richard Watterson. Beyond that, we don't have any more mentions, so I started researching everything I could think of. For example, many think it's a reference to Heathers, a movie that came out in 1988 and today has a TV series and even a musical. In the musical, specifically, there's a scene that deals with homophobia where they are at the funeral of 2 boys who were thought to be gay. Here their respective parents start arguing because one of them doesn't accept that their son is like that, and another one tells him he remembers the summer of '83 when they had that wonderful fishing trip. Nothing is super explicit, but it's extremely obvious that it's a reference to both men having an affair in their youth. Right in the summer of '83. And although this belief is somewhat popular, I have to say that I don't see it at all possible that in the incredible world of Gumball, this is being referenced because it has nothing to do with being lazy. There are also other crazy theories like that in that summer the video game Dragon's Lair came out, and maybe that had something to do with it, but the truth of it doesn't fit very well. A curious thing that I did find was the existence of brownies like Lazy Larry's. These were brownies that were sold in the US shortly before the episode came out, and strangely enough they weren't brownies seasoned with the herb we all suspected, but had a mixture of melatonin, valerian and rose hip. That made anyone who tried them very lazy and sleepy. So it was obviously part of a joke or a reference for the elders who watched the episode. As I said, there were no other references to what had happened that day throughout the series. But I did notice a handful of things that were a little strange. Returning an episode the weakest, if we pay attention, as Richard changes channels we can see that on the Weather Channel the date of that day appears. July 13, 2010. That means they are talking about an event that happened 27 years ago. That's too long. Richard's age can be easily calculated. In the episode, Richard's wand says that when he was Gumball age, i.e. 12 years old, his belief in magic was destroyed and he screamed for 15 years. This is obviously an exaggeration, but it gives us a very important clue. In the episode about the party he says that 20 years later they are still married. All these episodes, by the way, are from the first season. The same season that the laziest episode comes out. And all this tells us that Richard is about 47 years old for the events in the episode. Adding up Richard's 12 years plus 15 years until his marriage and another 20 until the events of the series. So for Richard it's okay, at that time Richard would be 20. But Larry isn't that old. He's obviously a representation of someone who's in his late 20s and has to juggle several low-profile jobs. In fact, on the internet, the highest age given to him is 34. But on the other hand, there's nothing official about his age. If we go with the assumption that he's in his late 20s, which is most likely, that means that Larry in the summer of '83 was just a baby. Other people think they have to be much older because of the mention of the summer of '83, but it doesn't really fit his character that he was the same age as Richard. It's a very weird situation, isn't it? Because it would mean that Richard won a baby in a contest of who's the laziest. Which becomes even more ridiculous considering that Larry is a rock. Another problem is that if Larry was a baby, then how did he get the title of the laziest? As my head turned to all these questions and I watched the episode over and over again, I realized something. Larry is the only living rock in the whole show. And yes, this show is known for having a lot of strange characters, but I was very particular about this detail because he has no parents, no family, and well, he's a rock. Rocks aren't born. So I came up with a little bit of a strange theory that goes way beyond the question in this episode. We know that Richard was constantly screaming between the ages of 12 and 27. And in the summer of '83 he would be right in the middle of his constant screaming period. We also know, thanks to Larry's comment, that they had a competition, but it was this competition that gave our beloved Larry the name of Lazy Larry. So, how is it possible for someone to win and lose the title of Elmore's laziest at the same time when he's so young? Well, my crazy theory is that somehow Richard is responsible for Larry coming to life. It sounds awfully strange, but I think it makes sense. If Larry came to life because of Richard's constant screaming, going from being a normal rock to a living rock means that in his normal rock form, he would have been, literally, Elmore's laziest. Because, well, rocks don't move. When he came to life he would have lost a title because, according to Larry Richard himself, he is lazier than a rock. This is not the end of it. According to the episode, the lesson Larry left school in the middle. This would indicate that he was still quite lazy even after the summer of '83. Whether we are right or wrong about our category. But the interesting thing comes at the end of the episode. Gumball says that the lesson Larry wanted to teach them was that they should finish their schooling to get jobs they are passionate about and pay well, and not end up like Larry, who wastes his life running after money so he can buy meaningless things in an attempt to fill the hole left by his existential fear. And Larry says he's right. In other words, this episode tells us that Larry is tied to multiple jobs out of a need to fill his existential void with shopping. If we go back to the laziest episode, we can see that when Larry mentions his house, his car and everything else he has, he's nervous and worried. This, along with other appearances by Larry, show us that his current state, tied to an impossible amount of jobs, is not due to the summer of '83, but to a trauma that occurred after he left his studies. That is, more than a decade later. In fact, he even seems to have compulsive buying traits, but that already raises too many crazy speculations. So, in conclusion, we know for sure that the summer of '83 wasn't what changed him, but it was the mixture of financial obligations and lack of preparation that came along when he was going to be independent without an education. More than a decade after the summer of '83. Everything points to Larry being impressively small when he simultaneously won and lost his lame duck title. And the only thing that makes sense is that Richard will end up giving Larry life by accident, since he had been screaming for years. This would make Larry win the title of the laziest being alive, but lose it for the same reason as he was competing against Richard. So I hope you liked this strange and speculative video. Give it a like if you did. I invite you to comment on other theories or if you see any flaws in this one, and subscribe for more videos like this one. See you in the next video. Bye.